Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of What You Don't See About Me as a Parent. Today we're diving into a topic that is very close to my heart because it's not just about me as a mom or about my daughter's journey with autism. It's about the others who have walked this journey right alongside us. It's about the siblings, the brothers and sisters who, while not diagnosed, lived every single day inside the world of autism because of their family. This episode is called The Sibling Perspective: What Brothers and Sisters Carry Too. And let me tell you, this one is hard because the truth is, as parents, we don't always see the weight our other children carry. Sometimes we see glimpses of it, an outburst, a quiet withdrawal, a sharp word, or even too much compliance. But the full depth of what's going on inside their hearts often doesn't reach us until years later. By then, sometimes the patterns are set, and we look back wishing we had done things differently. When I think about my own son, Sean, I know there are things we got right, and there are things we got wrong. And I can say that honestly, because parenting a child with additional needs doesn't come with a guidebook. You are thrown into the deep end, and while you're trying desperately to keep that one child afloat, the others are right there swimming beside you. Sometimes without meaning to, they end up swallowing water because your arms are already full. I remember in those early years, before we got proper help through courses like the Hurlybird, everything in our house revolved around keeping my daughter calm and stable. If she wanted silence, the whole house was quiet. If she needed sameness, we built our routines around it. If she had a meltdown, every other plan stopped. No matter if it was Sean's homework, his football practice, his bedtime routine, he learned quickly that his sister's needs came first, because otherwise the whole house erupts. And let me tell you, as a mother, that is exhausting. You feel torn in two and you don't even know where to turn. Here's the part that I really have to confess. In those years, to try and make it up to him, we gave Sean everything he asked for. Anything, toys, snacks, time on the computer, you name it. If he asked, he got it. It was guilt parenting at its finest. And we justified it by telling ourselves that since so much of our attention was on his sister, at least he should get what he wanted without a fight. At least one child in the house should feel like life was easy. But here's what I didn't realize at that time. That kind of parenting plants a seed of entitlement, a seed that says the world owes me because I am the overlooked one. And even though Sean has grown up so much and matured into adulthood, I can still see those traces. He still carries that intact sense that things should come easily to him, that he deserves without always having to fight for it. And I have to own my part in creating that. That's not easy to admit. Now, don't get me wrong. Sean is not unkind. He's not heartless. In fact, his teachers used to tell me, I don't think Sean lacks empathy. But what I came to see was that guilt parenting blurred the lines. Empathy doesn't just come from knowing how your siblings feels. It also comes from being asked to carry responsibility, from learning that not everything will be handed to you. And for years, Sean didn't have to carry that. We carried the chaos with his sister, and he got the compensation. Things started to shift when we got into the Hurlybird course. For the first time, someone sat us down and said, don't just focus on the child with the diagnosis. Think about the siblings too. That was like a light bulb moment. We began explaining autism to Sean, helping him understand his sister's world instead of just protecting him from it. That was when the real closeness between them started to grow. They weren't just two kids living in the same house anymore. They were brother and sister walking the same road. And let me tell you, sometimes their honesty with each other is brutal. She will tell him things as they are, no filter, and sometimes it scares him. But it also grounds him. It reminds him that even though she communicates differently, she still is equal. She has her own truths, her own perspective, and she is not afraid to share them. That's siblinghood in its rawest form. So, today in this episode, I want to pull back the curtain on that world. I want to talk about what siblings really carry, things we parents often don't see until later. I want to talk about the guilt, the empathy gaps, the silent sacrifices, but also the incredible resilience and maturity they develop because of this journey. And I want to challenge us as parents. How do we protect our children from being overshadowed without swinging the pendulum so far into guilt parenting that we create new struggles down the line? Because the truth is, siblings don't just grow up alongside autism. Autism shapes them. It shapes their friendships, their school life, their sense of responsibility, and even how they see themselves. And if we don't take time to notice what they're carrying, we risk raising children who look fine on the outside, but are quietly drowning on the inside. This conversation isn't easy, but it's necessary. Because for every child with a diagnosis, there are often brothers and sisters walking quietly in the background, carrying weights that no one has named. And today, I want us to name them. I want us to give them a voice. When I talk about parenting an autistic child, I have to be honest. It was never about her. It was always about all of us. And in the middle of it was Sean, her brother. Sean didn't ask for autism to enter her home. He didn't ask for meltdowns, hospital appointments, broken routines, or parents who were often stretched so thin that our energy barely made it through the day. Yet there he was, a little boy with needs of his own, learning to grow in the shadow of something none of us fully understood at the time. I have to admit, one of my biggest battles as a parent wasn't just learning how to support Sinead. It was figuring out how to make sure Sean felt seen. And the truth is, sometimes I didn't get the balance right. You see, when you're in the trenches of parenting a child with high needs, guilt becomes a constant companion. Guilt that you didn't play enough. Guilt that you snapped out of exhaustion. Guilt that one child is getting more of you than the other. And with Sean, that guilt came out in the form of giving. Whenever he asked for something, our instinct was to say yes. A toy, yes. A treat, yes. Time on the computer, yes. It wasn't because Sean demanded it. It wasn't because he was spoiled. It was because we were afraid of him feeling overlooked. We thought if we can't give him our time in the same way, at least we can give him something else. It was our way of saying, we love you, we see you, we didn't want you to feel forgotten. But here's what I've learned the hard way. No amount of gifts or yeses can replace presence. And in our attempt to fill that gap, we may have accidentally created another challenge. Sean learned quickly that the world around him bent easily with his requests, not because he was demanding, but because his parents were soft. And as he grew, we began to see how that pattern shaped him. Even in adulthood, there are traces of that early parenting decision, a sense of if I ask, I will be given. Not entitlement, not selfishness, just the residue of a childhood where guilt ruled our decision. And if I could go back and change one thing, it would be this. I would have given Sean fewer things and more of me. Another truth about siblings of autistic children is this. They often grow up faster. Sean had to learn to share space with meltdowns, with therapy schedules, with doctors, with strategies. He saw things most children his age never saw. He watched cupboards slammed, doors broken, toys thrown, food refused. And while all of this was happening, Sean often had to step aside, wait his turn, or go without. That builds resilience, yes, but it also builds questions in a child's mind. Why does my sister get away with things I can't? Why is mommy always with her? Why is daddy more tired when I want to play? We tried to explain as best as we could, but in the early years, even we didn't fully understand. And so Sean carried the weight of being the other child, the quiet one, the one we hoped would cope, the one who got the short end of our energy because his sister's needs were louder, messier, and harder to ignore. What changed everything for Sean and for us was the early bird course. For the first time, Sean wasn't just a bystander. He was included. He was explained to. We sat him down and told him about autism in a way he could understand. We told him why Sinead did what she did, why the meltdowns happened, why routines mattered so much to her. And in that moment, I saw a shift. Sean stopped seeing his sister as the girl who broke his toys or screamed in the supermarket. He began to see her as someone with a world inside her that needed understanding. He didn't always like it. He didn't always agree with it, but the seed of empathy was planted. And over time, that seed grew. Sean has always had a straightforward nature. He says what he thinks, sometimes with a bluntness that makes you pause. And living with Sinead meant he had to wrestle with frustrations most kids never face. There were days when he rolled his eyes, when he retreated to his room, when he asked, why does it always have to be about her? And honestly, those questions were fair because that's what it felt like to him. But as Sean grew older, something changed. The explanations, the course, the constant conversations, they sank in. And I began to see him not just tolerate his sister, but defend her, correct others when they didn't understand, step in when she was at risk of being taken advantage of. It wasn't an instant transformation, it was gradual, painfully gradual, but it was real. One thing I need to be clear about: Sean and Sinead are siblings, not saints. They tease each other, they argue. Sometimes they say things that cut deep, but that's the beauty of it. Autism didn't rob them of being siblings, it just gave their relationship a different texture. Sean learned to live with blunt truths from his sister, truths that sometimes scared him, but also sharpened him. And Sinead learned that her brother, even when frustrated, was still her ally. Looking back, there are lessons I carry for every parent raising children with additional needs alongside siblings. Number one, don't overgive out of guilt. Your child doesn't need more stuff, they need more of you. Number two, explain, explain, explain. Don't assume siblings will just cope. Give them tools to understand. Number three, celebrate their role. Being the sibling of a child with autism is hard work. Notice it, honor it. And number four, balance fairness with honesty. Sometimes life don't feel fair to siblings. Be honest about that. Tell them, yes, it's different, but here's why. And five, create sibling-only moments. Even if it's small, a trip for ice cream, a bedtime chat, a walk together, those moments matter. Today, when I look at Sean, I don't see a boy who missed out. I see a young man shaped by experiences that gave him strength. He's more independent, he's more resilient, he's more straightforward. He doesn't mince words, and while that has its challenges, it also a strength. And when I see Sean and Sinead together, laughing, bickering, helping each other, I see something that I once feared might never exist. Siblinghood. Real siblinghood. The kind that grows not in spite of autism, but alongside it. When Siobhan came along, the story of siblinghood in our house took another turn. She didn't come into the world in the same way Sean did. Wide-eyed, full of undivided attention that firstborns always get, she came into a home that was already shaped by autism. She came into routines, into structures, into meltdowns, into strategies. By the time she was born, we were knee deep in early bird courses, visual schedules, food battles, and daily planning that revolves around her older sister's needs. And that meant Siobhan's role was different from the very beginning. Siobhan grew up in what I often call the in-between space. She wasn't the firstborn who had years of attention before autism entered the picture. She wasn't the child with autism whose needs naturally drew the spotlight. She was the last one trying to carve out an identity in the space between. And that's something many siblings of children with additional needs experience. They are not forgotten, but they are not always fully seen either. They grow up adaptable because they have to fit into a family rhythm that wasn't designed around them. Siobhan learned early that some things in her home were non-negotiable. If her sister needed quiet, we all gave quiet. If her sister needed structure, we all followed the structure. If her sister had a meltdown, we all adjusted. That doesn't mean Siobhan didn't get love or attention. It did. She did. But it was love and attention filtered through the reality of autism. One of the things about Siobhan that became clear as she got older was her tendency to mask. She learned quickly to hold her feelings, to stay calm, to avoid adding to the chaos. And while that made her the easy child on the surface, it also meant she carried things quietly inside. I'll never forget the day when she finally let it out. She had an outburst. In her tears, she said, "Nobody listens to me. Nobody sees me. You only see Sinead." It was a heartbreaking moment, not because it wasn't true, but because it was her truth. That was her lived experience. She felt unseen, even though we loved her deeply. And this is where the lesson lies for parents like me. Sometimes the sibling who looks the calmest is actually carrying the heaviest load. But here's what I admire about Siobhan. She spoke up. So many siblings carry silent resentment into adulthood because they never felt safe enough to say it. But Siobhan gave us a gift that day. She voiced her pain, and as hard as it was to hear, it gave us a chance to change. We began to carve out time for her, one-to-one moments, listening without interruption, letting her voice be the loudest in the room, even if it's just for 10 minutes. It wasn't always easy, and we didn't always get it right, but it made a difference. Siobhan's journey has been one of learning empathy in real time. As a younger sibling, she didn't just watch autism happen. She lived alongside it from birth. She saw her sister's struggles. She experienced the disruption. She had to adapt before she even knew what adapting meant. But she also grew resilient. She grew insightful. Even as a child, she could see through the surface of things. She noticed when her sister was trying, even if others didn't. She pointed out progress in ways that sometimes we missed as adults. And while she carried frustration, she also carried love. One of my proudest moments as a parent is watching Sean and Siobhan both step into their roles as siblings in different ways. Sean, with his straightforwardness, his protective edge, his "I'll defend you, but I'll also tell you off" style. Siobhan, with her sensitivity, her quiet noticing, her ability to read the room and adjust. Together they form the kind of support system that no parent can manufacture. They have lived it. They have grown through it. And even though their experiences are different, they both carry the mark of being a sibling to a child with autism. From Siobhan's journey, there are lessons I want every parent to hear. 1. Don't confuse silence with coping. Just because your child isn't acting out doesn't mean they're fine. Check in. And 2, encourage expression. Give your child the language and the space to say how they feel, even if it hurts. And 3, balance the attention. It won't be perfect, but be intentional. Plan sibling only time. And 4, notice their perspective. Ask them what it feels like. Don't assume you know. And 5, affirm their role. Tell them your place in this family matters just as anyone else's. Today, when I see Siobhan, I don't just see the younger sibling who once felt invisible. I see a young woman learning to own her voice. I see someone who has been shaped by her sister's autism, yes, but also by her own courage to speak up. She still has moments where she feels overshadowed. That's natural. But she also knows now that she's heard, that her perspective matters, that she's part of a story, not just watching from the sidelines. And that's the gift of listening to our children. We can't carry the past, but we can change how they step into the future. When we talk about siblings of children with autism, the narrative often slips into one or two extremes. Either they are painted as saints who sacrifice everything for their brother or sister, or they are described as neglected, overlooked, and broken by the weight of responsibility. But the truth, like most things in parenting, is far from complex. It is woven in quiet contradictions, in moments of loyalty and moments of resentment, in laughter that sits right outside frustration. One of the clearest memories I carry with me is of Sean standing in front of his sister at the playground, while other children were staring, whispering, even laughing. He didn't look to me. He didn't ask for help. He squared his little shoulders and firmly said, "That's my sister." He didn't need to explain autism. He didn't need to give a lecture. In that moment, his presence was explanation enough. He was saying, "You don't have to understand her, but you do have to respect her." That moment stays with me because it showed me something. Our children are often braver than we give them credit for. The world will misunderstand their sibling. The world will label. The world will judge. But in those moments, siblings sometimes rise up as defenders, not because we've trained them, but because love gives them a backbone. That was Sean's victory. A small, ordinary day in the playground became a lifelong reminder that the seeds we plant at home do bloom when the world tests them. Now contrast that with Siobhan. She is different. Her battles are quieter, less visible, and in many ways harder to spot until they erupt. Where Sean would speak out, Siobhan would go inward. She would mask. She would smile, nod, and pretend everything was fine. She would say nothing when she should have been crying out for help. She didn't want to add pressure. She didn't want to upset anyone. And she certainly didn't want to be the problem in a house that already felt full of challenges. But masking takes a toll. It builds and builds until it spills out. I remember nights when her words came rushing out all at once. Nobody sees me. Nobody listens to me. Those words cut deeper than any meltdown could, because behind them was a child who had been carrying the invisible weight of trying not to add to the family's struggles. She carried silence as a burden, and silence is a heavy thing. These two perspectives, the defender and the masker, reveal how siblings process life alongside autism differently. Neither one is right or wrong. Neither one is easier or harder. They are simply different battles, and both deserve to be named and respected. What I have learned is this: parenting siblings in this context isn't about trying to make things fair. Fairness doesn't exist in the same way it does in other families. What does exist, however, is attention. Attention to the small cues. Attention to when Sean was puffing up to protect, but maybe also feeling left out. Attention to when Siobhan was quiet too long, smiling too easily, pretending too hard. Attention to the fact that while one child was demanding space loudly, another was shrinking in silence. And here's where the parenting victory comes in. The wins for us as parents are not always in the big strategies or the therapies or the structured plans. Sometimes the win is simply seeing our other children, really seeing them, and naming their feelings before they get buried. Saying, I know this isn't easy for you. I know you sometimes feel like we're asking too much. I see you. That recognition is a gift to siblings. I'll be honest, I didn't always get it right. There were seasons where guilt ruled my decisions. Out of guilt for spending so much time with Sinead, I overcompensated with Sean. If he asked for something, I said yes too quickly, because deep down I felt bad for the hours I couldn't give him. And if I'm being truthful, that shaped him in ways I now wish I had balanced differently. But again, that's parenting. We all make decisions in survival mode. Looking back, I can say the real victory is not in getting it perfect, but in being willing to adjust when you realize you have leaned too far one way. Siblings need honesty as much as they need protection. That's why the early bird course was such a turning point for us. It didn't just help us help Sinead, it helped us explain her to her siblings. It gave us language we didn't have before. Suddenly, Sean and Siobhan weren't just coping with their sister, they were understanding her. That knowledge turned confusion into compassion, and compassion is a powerful anchor in sibling relationships. The truth is, the weight siblings carry doesn't disappear, it shapes them, but it can shape them into resilience, empathy, and strength if we as parents do the work of guiding them through it. And part of that work is celebrating their wins, not just the autistic child's milestones, but the siblings' moments of growth too. The day Sean walked into the kitchen and said, Mom, she's actually trying, give her a second, that was a win. The night Siobhan finally said, I can't keep holding it in, and let her emotions spill out, that was also a win. Because both moments showed that they were not just surviving this journey, they were learning, stretching, and growing from it. And here is where I want to leave you in this section. Don't underestimate your other children. They may carry hidden battles, but they also carry hidden victories. They might defend, they might mask, they might even resist at times, but each of those is a piece of their story, and each deserves to be acknowledged. When you celebrate their small victories, you tell them your role matters too. When I step back and look at the sibling journey, I realize it's one of the most under-acknowledged pieces of the autism story. Parents get support groups. Children with autism get services, therapies, and plans. But siblings? They are often left to figure it out in silence. They sit in waiting rooms, tag along to appointments, hear conversations about meltdowns and strategies that were never really meant for their ears. They are the background audience to our parenting, but they are also part of the cast. And yet, here's the beauty. Siblings don't just survive in that background role. They learn, they adapt, they develop a wisdom beyond their years. Sometimes it comes through trials, sometimes through tears, sometimes through laughter that bursts out in the middle of chaos. Sean showed me that loyalty doesn't need a speech. His defense of his sister in public wasn't polished, it wasn't planned, but it was powerful. It taught me that siblings can be the first shield against the world's cruelty. And Siobhan showed me that silence speaks too. Her ability to mask, to carry herself like everything was fine when it wasn't, reminded me that siblings need space to break, to cry, to be vulnerable without feeling like they're adding more weight to the family. As parents, our job is not to erase those burdens, but to walk alongside our children as they carry them. To remind them that what they are experiencing, the confusion, the guilt, the frustration, the pride, it's all part of what will one day shape them into compassionate, resilient adults. One of the mistakes I made early on was thinking that giving extra treats, extra yeses, would somehow compensate for the imbalance of attention. It took me years to understand that what my children needed most wasn't more things, it was more truth. They needed me to sit down and explain, this is why your sister needs more help right now. This doesn't mean you matter less. This is hard, but it's okay for you to say it's hard. That honesty, though uncomfortable at first, built trust. He told my children that they didn't have to hide their feelings to protect me. And in that trust, I found a new kind of family rhythm. One where we could acknowledge the imbalance without pretending it wasn't there. And here's where faith comes in. I've had to remind myself over and over that God placed each of my children in this family for a reason. None of it was by accident. Sean was given the heart of a protector. Siobhan was given the sensitivity of a listener. Sinead was given creativity and determination that even when it overwhelmed us was shaping all of us. And Ike and I were given the responsibility and the privilege of guiding them through it together. So what do siblings carry? They carry the weight of being the other child, the one not always in the spotlight. They carry the fear of losing their parents' attention, the frustration of cancelled plans, the embarrassment of public scenes, and the pressure of unspoken expectations. But they also carry laughter shared only between siblings. They carry the fierce pride of seeing their brother or sister accomplish something the world thought impossible. They carry stories that will shape how they raise their own children one day. And what do we as parents carry? We carry the responsibility to notice all of it, to celebrate not just the milestones of our autistic child, but the milestones of the siblings who grew quietly in the background. To say, I saw you stepped up for your sister today. I saw you bite back your own frustration to give her space. I saw you cry, and I see your courage in admitting it. These are victories too. Let me end by saying this. Siblings are not secondary characters. They are part of the story. And if we are willing to see them, listen to them, and guide them, they will not only survive this journey, they will thrive in it. They will become the kind of people this world desperately needs. Strong, compassionate, unafraid to stand up for someone who looks different, speaks differently, or struggles in ways others don't understand. And maybe that is the greatest win of all.